So I've had the iPhone 4S for about 3 weeks now, and I'm ready to give you my review on it and my impressions on the device. The first thing that I could say is that overall, I think that the iPhone 4S is really a great phone. The one thing to note though is that it's not the only great phone on the market right now. In fact, right now might be one of the best times to be in the market for a new cell phone because there are a lot of really great options to choose from out there. And it really all depends on your personal preference, what you want out of a cell phone. Now, a lot of the iPhone is a known quantity. You know that there's a lot of polish to the device. The OS is pretty much unchanged throughout since it started, although in this video we are going to cover some of the differences, some of the new features that have been introduced into the OS. But the first thing that you'll notice is the size of the phone. The size has always been a 3.5-inch screen, a 3.5-inch diagonal here on the iPhone. If you want a larger screen, you're going to have to go with a different device. To me, I think 3.5 inches is a little bit small. For me, the sweet spot is 4 inches. I will be using a Galaxy Nexus when it comes out, and that is going to be a 4.65-inch screen. So that will be the largest screen I've ever used, and that might actually be a little big. But I'm not going to prejudge that. I'm going to wait until I actually get my hands on the device. But the iPhone 4S, like I said, the screen is a little bit small for my liking. I prefer a 4-inch screen on it. But if screen size is not an issue to you, then you'll be happy to know that the iPhone 4S and the iPhone 4 before it has the greatest pixel density of any phone on the market today. It actually has 326 pixels per inch on the screen, giving it the highest resolution screen of any cell phone on the market today. Now, the interface has been pretty much unchanged for quite a while. You have all your grid of apps on the device, and then you have your dock down below here, and then of course if you scroll to the right, you get your search where you can search on the phone. Some of the new things that have been introduced into iOS is this drop-down menu. Now, this drop-down menu is pretty much something that's been on Android since the beginning. So it's been on Android for 3 years, and it's just been adopted by iOS. And it is a really good way to handle notifications because you have all your notifications in here, and you can also put widgets in here. That's the way Apple handles their widgets. You can put weather widgets, stock widgets, all different kinds of widgets in your notification area here. And if you had any text messages or missed calls or anything like that, you'd get them in the notifications here as well, and you can dismiss them accordingly. It's pretty much just trying to keep up with Android and adopting an Android feature that has been there for 3 years. Another thing that's brand new in the iPhone is integrated voice support, which is something that's called Siri. Now, if you want to interact with Siri, you can do it from the lock screen, or you can just access it from any screen basically by long pressing your home button here and asking any question. What's 2 plus 2?
Okay. Here you go.
There you go. So using Siri is a way to basically have voice commands on your phone and actually talk with the device, and in some instances it talks back. Now, I did a video comparing stock Android voice controls versus stock iPhone voice controls when I did a Android versus Siri video, and if you're interested in that, please check it out. There'll be a link to all the videos I've done with the iPhone 4S at the end of this video. But basically what I found is that Siri is a little bit more integrated into the OS, whereas Android voice controls are much quicker. So you have better speed on Android, but you have better integration with the iOS features with Siri. So that's something for you to decide if what is more valuable to you. Do you like the fact that you actually speak to the phone and interact with it that way? Or do you want a less conversational but faster access with your Android voice controls? So definitely, like I said, if you're interested, check out that video. Now, this phone has a dual-core processor in it, and it definitely shows because it's a very snappy device, very responsive in a lot of ways, and really a welcome addition to the new iPhone here. Now, one of the ways where iOS is trailing Android is still in navigation. With the addition of Siri, you can actually speak to the phone and have Siri get you directions somewhere. But if you want turn-by-turn navigation Android has a better solution for you. There are ways to get turn-by-turn navigation on an iPhone, but it involves purchasing a $100 app from TomTom. As I showed you in a previous video, the antenna problem is no longer a problem on this phone. They fixed that issue. In fact, if I was holding an iPhone 4 exactly the way I'm holding this right now, I could make the signal disappear. But on this phone, no problems at all. So that's a good thing. The camera on this device is one of the best cameras you can find in a cell phone. It's an 8-megapixel camera, and it actually has 4 lenses in this lens here, 4 different lenses here. And it has 1 LED flash here. Now, as cell phone cameras go, this has an image stabilization because when you're holding a small device like this, it's much easier to shake it and rattle it and make your image wobbly. But I've found that pretty much all cell phone cameras, I've never found one that really doesn't wobble. I uploaded some camera tests from this camera to YouTube, and you can check them out. There's actually 2 separate ones, a low light and a regular daylight version, to give you an idea of what the quality is. When I unloaded the actual videos themselves from this camera onto my computer, there was really not much of a difference in the stabilization on the camera itself. Still very herky-jerky like a lot of cell phone cameras. So if you really want to get quality out of this, like some people say that it's comparable to some DSLRs, and supposedly there's a movie which has some footage from an iPhone 4S in it, or an iPhone 4. Really, in order to get that kind of quality, you would have to mount it on some sort of mount that has no movement on it at all, other than some sort of constrained panning motion that's basically holds this device solid in it and then rolls around. So that's pretty much the only way you're going to get true solid footage on something. But the image stabilization is good on the phone, and as far as cell phones go, it's a very good camera. But cell phones have a long way to go before they're going to match the quality on a dedicated camera. Now, some people have said that the battery life on the 4S is a little bit less than the iPhone 4. I really can't speak on that because I don't have previous experience owning an iPhone 4. I've just used them here and there. But I do get fairly decent use out of a charge on this phone, so I really don't have any complaints on the battery life on this phone. Now, anecdotally, I can tell you through the use of this phone in the past 3 weeks versus the use of my Motorola Atrix phone in the past several months, I can say that the iPhone 4S drops a couple of more calls than my Atrix did. And I can pinpoint this to certain areas. And there's certain zones where I'd be driving around where this phone would drop the call, where my Motorola Atrix would not drop the call. It's not very noticeable, but it is noticeable. It's not a dramatic amount of dropped calls on the iPhone, but compared to the Atrix, there is ever so slight, maybe 1 or 2 more dropped calls that I'd get in a certain area than I would on the Motorola Atrix phone. Also, one anomaly that I had when using this phone is that I had a situation where 2 people called me and it never showed up on this phone at all. So that might have just been a network glitch possibly, or it might have to do with the phone. I've never had that problem even though I have AT&T on my Motorola Atrix, but I did have it on this phone where I had 2 separate calls in the same day, and they didn't leave a message, but there was no record on the phone itself of a missed call. So I had to find out about it actually when I talked to these 2 people afterward, which was kind of interesting. And I would probably need a little bit further testing on this device to see if it was a network glitch or if it was this phone itself. But it's worth mentioning in this review here. Now, the one glowing thing I have to say about this phone is the mic on it is incredible. When I do video on this phone, or even if I'm talking to somebody on this phone, the voice quality is excellent. And people have told me that the voice quality is excellent when I'm talking to them on the other line. And I can tell when I film a video on this phone that the mic is excellent and also the speaker is of an excellent quality. So that's really, to me, out of everything else on this phone that really stands out that I really like is the mic quality and the speaker quality on the phone. Very top-notch, and I don't really hear a lot about that, so it was a nice surprise when I actually used this phone, because it really is, like I said, top-notch and a really good plus to this phone. Now, normally I go very in-depth in my reviews and let you know exactly, all the ins and outs of the operating system. But the interesting thing about the iPhone 4S here is that it runs off of iOS, and there's not a lot of changes that have happened to the device. Obviously, like I covered before, you have the updated camera, you have the updated innards, which really make this operating system sing. It's really snappy and very good to have a dual-core processor in it. You have Siri, which I covered, and you have the drop-down menus, which are new. But other than that, it's an iPhone. So you're pretty much, if you know anything about iPhones, you're pretty much familiar with what you're going to get on the device. And if you have a previous generation of the iPhone, or even some of the iPod Touches, you can actually download iOS 5 and try it out for yourself. In fact, if you have an iPhone 3GS or an iPhone 4, you can download iOS 5. The same is true for iPad 1 and iPad 2. Also, iPod Touches, 3rd generation and 4th generation can use it. So if you have any of those devices, definitely download iOS 5 and try it out for yourself. The only thing, like I said, is that you're going to get better performance on the iPhone 4S just because of that dual-core processor. Now, one thing that you do get in iOS 5 are iMessages, which is sort of like BlackBerry Message, BBM, which you can tell if somebody's read your message, all that stuff. It's basically a text messaging service that's been added to iOS. Twitter is more integrated into the phone itself. You have this Newsstand app here, which you can read magazines on. The Game Center has been updated. And one of the big changes with iOS 5 is that you no longer have to plug the device into a computer. You can just go into a store and buy an iPhone and use it out the door without having to plug it into iTunes. You can sign up for iTunes or sign into your iTunes account straight from your phone. And that holds true for the iPad 2 as well. So that's definitely a welcome change in iOS 5 that they didn't have in previous versions. So that's definitely something to consider. Something also that's brand new in iOS is iCloud. Basically what it does is it takes pictures, things on your phone, uploads it to the cloud, and brings it down to any of your other iDevices. Personally, it's not something that I'm going to use much, but if you like to keep your devices synced between one another, it's a good option for you. And what you get with iCloud, you get unlimited storage for your purchased music, TV shows, apps, and books. Everything else, you get 5 gigabytes for your mail, documents, and your other backup. Now, the iTunes Match service, which was supposed to be launched a couple of days ago, but I think they missed their launch, which is a $24.99 a year service. It'll match items that you have in your iTunes library so you can actually stream them. That's something that I wouldn't be using, but it's something that you might want to take note of if it's something of interest to you. Also worth noting, you have Find My iPhone in here, so you can track your iPhone if you do lose it. And also you have a Find My Friends option here, which is a way to track people with iPhones that you can use a time limit on. That way you know where everybody is as long as they're using an iDevice. And then you can turn it off so that people aren't always following and knowing exactly where you are, because that can get a little bit creepy and a little bit intrusive. But if you're in a situation where you're at a concert or you're somewhere in a big crowd at a fair or something like that, it might work out well to know exactly where your friends are so you can meet up with them during that time and then turn that feature off. So it's a nice little thing to have. All in all, like I said, a great phone, but there are other great phones on the market right now. So really, what do you want out of your device? If you want the best screen resolution on any phone right now, one of the best cameras on the market, iOS, which is buttery smooth and a well-known entity, then this phone might be a great option for you. But if you want other things like a larger screen, 4G LTE, or NFC, which allows you to use your phone as a wallet or actually beam information from one device to another, then the iPhone 4S is not for you. The way I look at it is when you get an iPhone, you're going to get a very polished product. but you're not necessarily going to get the most cutting edge features. That's not to say that the iPhone is not cutting edge, because it's a very good device. But you're not going to get those cutting edge features like 4G, which is, if you've ever used 4G, it makes your jaw drop. It's amazingly fast. Or upcoming NFC, larger screens, things of that nature like I mentioned. To me, Android is more cutting edge. It's almost like seeing, if you could compare iOS versus Android, even though Android has more users in the mobile space, but Android is more cutting edge. It's almost more indie, if you can understand the comparison there. It's almost like seeing your band, your favorite band, before they hit it big. It's like going to the local dive to see your favorite band, whereas iOS is almost like hearing that band on the radio. Once they've made it big, they get polished, you hear them on the radio, you see it in iOS. So, you know, take 4G for instance. Right now it's rolling out, it's cutting edge, it's fast, it's awesome, it's the future, but it's not on iOS yet because it has to be polished and it has to be just right for it to be on the device. So in a nutshell, that's what I would have to say is the difference between Android and iOS. You're going to get a much more polished experience out of iOS, but on Android you're going to get all those cutting edge features right when they're launched. So what do you think? I like to think of Tech Harvest as not only a channel where you can get reviews and unboxings and, you know, tips, tricks, all that good stuff, but I like to think of it as a community. What do you think? As long as you're not abusive towards anybody else and you have a well thought out opinion, every opinion is valid, as long as you're respecting everybody else that's here. So what do you think? Do you like iOS? Do you dislike iOS? Would you buy this phone? Would you not buy this phone? If you would not buy this phone, what other phone would you like? I want to hear it because, like I said, this is an open forum. It's a community for you guys. And I think of every video as, you know, I can't think of everything. So if you have anything to add it in the comments because it's really great for somebody who's looking at this phone and considering buying it to get views from all different perspectives. So what do you think? Please leave your comments in the comments section down below. So that pretty much does it for this video. I'll see you guys next time.